my world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
I'm joined down here at the very welcoming and modern surroundings of Lucan Library by two librarians. On my left here is Ciaran and Clarke. Ciaran, welcome. And on my right is Sarah McHugh, both librarians here.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Ciaran, we start with yourself. I suspect, based on my experience of friends who are librarians, that this is something you wanted to do rather than something you fell into. Is that a reasonable assumption of somebody I've met in the first 5 minutes?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely something that is a vocation that you decide that you want to do. So my background is that I studied English literature. I've been a reader since I was like 5 years old, and the way that I got into libraries is through Ed House Library, and I do want to have a shed Ed House Library because it's not very well known. It's the only LGBT library in the country.
This is the one in Capel Street.
The one in Capel Street, and it's housed in Ed House, which is a community centre for LGBT, for the LGBT community. And I was kind of instrumental in relaunching that library. And that's what gave me the bug, basically, to go into libraries.
And Sarah, what's your story with becoming a librarian? Was it again something you always wanted to do?
It was. Library's one of the family. I have two aunts who are librarians as well down the country. And I did my master's in library science, because it's a science, about 10 years ago. And I've started working in Lucan, very happily working in Lucan for almost 2 years now.
Yeah. One of my friends, and she always wanted to be a librarian. Back in those days, and we're talking, the mid-70s here, you had to have a qualification in librarianship. Is that still the same situation?
The way it works is when you have your grades, so it's myself and Ciaran would be grade 3s, so we'd be library assistants. You go up then, so you can go as far as grade 5 without your degree, but after that you'd need to have a master's.
Yeah. Ciaran, I want to ask you, because libraries were very important when I was growing up. I grew up in the North Inner City, and libraries, I would argue, was where I learned things as opposed to in school. They've changed dramatically certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, and I'm particularly impressed with the library out in Tallaght. It always seems to be very used. But tell us, previously it used to be books and magazines and the occasional publication. What's the range that people are expecting now from libraries?
Well, you're absolutely right. Libraries have changed drastically, and I think one of the main things that libraries are now, and the way I think of it is a library. It's a college for the working class, and that means that you have to have a broad range of resources. So the library isn't just a place of books. It's not a place where you sit down and librarians walk around shushing people. Not anymore. What we have now is digital literacy. We have technology, and librarians are embracing that hugely. So I'd be involved in a lot of STEAM activities in the library, and that's geared towards promoting science, technology, engineering, arts, music. Sarah as well is doing a programme of music engineering that's coming up in Lucan. We have technology all around us, new flip charts, iPads, and I think the reason for that is we need to embrace the 21st century. People need to be able to come into a library and download a book onto their device. They need to be able to understand how to use computers, how to code. So librarians really embrace that kind of technological change.
Sure. So something I noticed, Sarah, when I first went out to the Lucan Library. It seemed to be very, very much in demand by people who are what I would call not native Irish born, because we assume everybody's got smartphones these days, but that's not quite true. And it was almost impossible, I would suggest, to just walk in and get a computer screen. Whether people are using it for research, whether they're using it for email, or even just social media. How important do you find that is to the people that you serve out here in Lucan?
It's hugely important, because libraries are probably the one place you can think. I mean, I can't think of any other place you can go into. You're not expected to buy anything. You're not expected to move on. No one's looking at you to go, how long are you going to be here? It's a place for everyone. You could be in here from morning to night, doing whatever you want to do. In terms of the people who aren't native to Ireland, we have CV classes, we have language classes, we help people out to use computers, job interview skills, all those kind of things, because it's very difficult. I mean, I've never lived in a foreign country, but I can't imagine coming in not knowing the system. We assume it's as easy as go in, maybe ask about a job, things like that. It's not how it works anymore. People need as much help as they can get, and that's what libraries are here to do. Yeah,
we would automatically assume that the vast majority of your material is in English. Is there a demand for material in other languages as well?
There is, and we have sections of material in other languages, and we also have free online classes for other languages as well, including English.
Going back to yourself, Ciaran. Is it a generational thing that our generation loved books? We love the physical touch of books, turning pages, and I suppose even the smell of books. Whenever I get on public transport, this is the benchmark I use, I virtually never see anybody reading books these days. People I'm not saying that people aren't using reading novels or reading biographies on their smartphones, but how important are the physical book these days to a lot of people?
I think there is kind of a perception out there that physical books are kind of dying off, or that the publishing industry is going out of business, but actually it's thriving. So what you might see, is a lot of people are on their smartphones, and a lot of people are reading ebooks and audiobooks on their phones, but we still have a huge turnover of physical books, and it's not just older people that are still reading books. Children, Lucan is 2/3 children's books.
Okay.
And children are coming in by the basketful with books, with physical books. So I think it's actually what's happening is there's more of a range of different kind of media. So children are reading physical books, they're also reading books on their tablets, they're getting involved in coding on their tablets, they're doing, accessing a lot of different kinds of media. We also have older people coming in because they see that technology, how important technology is, and they, Sarah and myself this year did a workshop on using BorrowBox, which is one of the library's resources for downloading ebooks and audiobooks. And we had an entire group of older people that had come in because they wanted to learn how to use their devices so that they could read ebooks. So I think really what you're seeing in libraries is that it's a huge mix of media.
Sure. Yeah,
people are using all kinds. The printed word is still alive and kicking.
Like, just in addition to that, we have a national library system now. So every library in Ireland is connected, and there's almost 15 million items travelling through our system, and the bulk of those items are books.
Okay, that's very interesting. The something that was announced very recently was that certainly Dublin City Council, their libraries are not going to be following up on fines, and they're not going to be charging. Is that the same situation out here in South Dublin, and is that message getting out there?
That's the national policy now. So it's all on children's items. So even if you have a child's book out, taken out on an adult's ticket, there's no fines for it now. If you lose a child's book, there's no fines for it. So there will be. It's more about there being. It takes away that barrier of access for people. People think it's 5 cents, it's 10 cents, but particularly when you've got a number of children, you've got a number of children's books out, it can add up. And I think that it's far more of an incentive for people to bring things back or to keep an eye on things if access to the library is more of an issue, as opposed to putting up a monetary barrier for them.
Yeah. So how do you get your books back then?
People are actually great.
Yeah.
I think there's a misconception. People don't bring things back. But the majority of things do come back. And I think, as I said, it's more of an incentive to bring things back when you know that your access to the library could be affected, as opposed to like paying 50 cents off on a book.
Yeah, okay. Ciaran, I want to come to the LGBT dimension of libraries. Back in my day, and I will always refer to that as the benchmark. There was no such thing as LGBT books because censorship was rife in those days. You couldn't even buy them in the bookshops. What is the situation now? Has that, if you like, attitude eased somewhat?
Well, absolutely. I think we're in a completely different world now. So obviously we are not censoring books now, LGBT books. So there's a huge range, as Sarah's saying, there's 15 million books going through our system, and a huge amount of those, or certainly a good representation of those, is LGBT material. One amazing resource, again, is Outhouse Library. That's one of the finest collections of LGBT material I've seen in book form. But I think a lot of that is reliant on staff. So I know certainly in South Dublin there are a few staff that are specifically buying in LGBT material, saying we need to have this book, we need to have this book. So I suppose that's staff-led as well. But the library service itself, I mean, is very committed to equality and making sure that there's the broadest range of material for people.
So if I come into Lucan Library and I said, Ciaran, point me at Tom of Finland.
You may not get Tom of Finland. Obviously there is a question there just on what material any library is having, whether it's LGBT or not. But I mean, I could point you to Tom of Finland in Outhouse. Directly there. But you know, if you do have a title that you come in, if we don't have it in Lucan, it's going to be somewhere in the catalogue around the country, and you can order it in, and that takes, you know, a few days or a couple of weeks. So there's a huge amount of access now that there wasn't before. Yeah.
Often, Sarah, and I suppose this is historically the case, LGBT work was largely male-oriented or male. What's the situation for LGBT women? Is there more of it being produced, and is there more of a demand for it?
There's more of a demand for it, and I do think there's more visibility. I mean, there is you're right, always been kind of an issue for women. You know, even if you go out in the scene, you know, everything is very kind of male-oriented.
It's male-oriented, yeah.
I mean, I suppose there's historical and there's social context to that as well, but I suppose particularly the library service, like, it's about equality and it is about diversity and accessibility. Like during the summer, like for Pride here, like myself and Ciaran, and that's what's great about being so supportive here. Like we had a coffee morning for Pride, LGBT, the Pone Auntie, and you know, we had books out and we had magazines. Like we have GCN always on display there too. You know. So the visibility, I think, is there, and the equality and the accessibility. This is no more than with any women's issues. Women are always fighting for representation. I mean, and it is a fight, no matter, you know, where in the spectrum you fall. So that kind of all ties in together, I think. Yeah.
When I was younger, pretty much the only LGBT book for women and about women was The Well of Loneliness.
So bleak.
well, interestingly, and I only discovered this by accident when I came back from Australia, the YWCA building, which was in Ballsbridge at the time, was actually called Radcliffe Hall.
That's gas.
Isn't it? You know, so so what LGBT women would be in demand these days? I would imagine, Sarah, Luke, are things like Tipping the Velvet.
Yeah, Sarah Waters. She's huge, like, you know. Yep. And then you have things like the young adult novels, like things like The Miseducation of Cameron Post. Like that was a huge, I mean, it's a classic, and then they had the film out of it. And a lot of it too, because we have DVD box sets and things like that too. So things like you can get Tipping the Velvet, you can get the DVD after it.
Okay.
You know? So Emma Donoghue is someone as well, not always LGBT themed, but obviously being a queer woman herself. So what's great too, I suppose, it's because we have a whole catalogue, like a whole national catalogue there available to us. If someone comes in to look for something, like we're always open to things that we've never heard of. I mean, I'm a big reader, but there's numerous queer authors I've never heard of that I'm always delighted when someone comes in like, never heard of that. That's great now, must look her up kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, is that the same with male as well, Ciaran? Because most of my literature, LGBT literature, ironically, I discovered through my father. When he got to about 50, suddenly the books that were coming into the house changed dramatically, and we got the first one, I think, that he brought in that was very, how would I put it, was very graphic, was Jean Genet. Yes, Carrel of Brest, if you ever read that and saw the movie. I presume these things now, nobody even raises an eyebrow.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, so when I first came in, I was searching through the catalogue because I'd come from an LGBT library and I was very interested in seeing what was on the national catalogue. And almost everything that I had in my little library in Outhouse was on the catalogue.
That's pretty good.
And I was really impressed with that. I mean, there was obviously, in Outhouse, there's 5,000 purely LGBT authors, so you're not going to match that. But I was very impressed when I came in to see how much there actually was.
Okay.
And I don't think there's certainly a huge difference between in modern times in libraries is that there's not a censorship situation of books. There's not people pulling off Jean Genet and saying we can't have that, or Edmund White and saying you can't have that. They are on the catalogue. They're obviously, we do split young adult and junior, so anything that does have graphic material is going to be in the adult, but it is there to be found, and that's great.
So how does that work with audiovisual material? If somebody comes in and says, I want such a movie, and I was reading a piece a friend of mine wrote recently, and she was saying the difference between obscene and pornography was often context. Now, if somebody came in and said we wanted something that was a movie, or even, how would that work out here? Would it be available, or would you have to have it, or would there be restrictions?
Well, I mean, if you look out on our shelves, there's Piccadilly Films are among there. That's a famous queer film producer. And I don't know, that's a debate that is bigger than me, the difference between erotic film and pornography.
Sure.
If it's not banned, if it's not legally banned,
we're probably
basically we can get it in. We're not here to judge anyone getting their items or what they're looking for.
So would you have say childproof if somebody wanted to?
Well, everything is, because it's all digital now. Everything's on a card.
Okay.
So a child can't come up to a self-service checkout if they try to run an adult DVD through on a child's card or a young adult card. They won't be able to. They'll be told they have to bring their item up to the desk, and they won't be able to take it out without a parent or a guardian.
Or even watch it, presumably.
Yeah, or no, they wouldn't be able to do that.
No, because I worked for another radio station. We had in the days when they called them internet cafes, and it was in the middle of a very public building like this. We went down, somebody went by, and there was this guy looking at complete porn in the middle of the day.
I worked in libraries like 10, 12 years ago, and it was when we were getting digital access as well. And I mean, this is in the Midlands where the digital access isn't great, and it happened more than once where me, barely out of my teens, having to go down to say to someone, "Man, you can't." But we could remotely go shut it down, but before the safeguards came in.
I bet you almost exclusively it was male.
Yeah, it was,
So, Ciaran, and again, feel free to say you're not aware of the process, but before we came on air, I was mentioning to you of a good friend of mine called Glenn Quigley. Now, Glenn has written 2 novels, one called Moth and Moon, and the other one is called, I think, The Lion Lies Waiting, both of which are self-published. And I was asking him how was he doing at getting into the libraries, and he was really proud of the fact that Tala had agreed to stock his, certainly the first novel anyway. How would an author who, even if they're self-published, how would they perhaps approach getting them into the library so that that they could get a wider readership?
Well, so as far as the process, as far as I know, particularly so for published novels, the publisher will contact the library service and get the novel in that way. For self-published, it's about self-promotion, so they would have to contact the library service themselves. And I think Sarah was saying normally somebody would write a letter to the county librarian. But I mean, another way is to just come into the library itself, to one of the branches, and ask for something to be purchased. So you can come in and do a purchase request and ask for something to be on the shelves, and a librarian in the branch can buy that in. We'll contact our acquisitions and say, can we, if it's on Amazon, we can get it.
Yeah. Well, in both cases with Glenn, his books are well written. They're good rollicking yarns. They're almost what I said to him. It's like gay versions of Poldark. But without any of the graphic detail. It's almost like a romantic novel written from a bear perspective, which is.
Okay. I definitely know a few men now would be interested.
Oh yeah. Well, very popular when Bear Fela is on. So So let's talk about the LGBT. Is it the staff network?
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. You're a member, Sarah.
I am.
Have you been a member from the beginning?
Yeah. It was basically Ciaran's brainchild, and I jumped in on the ground floor as well as one of our other colleagues. So 3 of us all together. So Ciaran's chairperson, I'm the social chair, and then Mark is comms, I suppose. We just saw there was a need for the South Dublin County Council are very inclusive. They, to be fair, they're great, and they've been incredibly supportive. We had really hit no roadblocks at all, but we just felt like for accessibility, for visibility, that it would be good to have a kind of safe space for staff members, because we were surprised that this is only the 3rd staff network that the council has been set up, and we got a huge amount of support from Dublin City Council, particularly Martina Malone.
What's the other one other than you guys? I thought it was
actually just us. It's ourselves and Dublin City.
Right, I thought we were the 3rd.
Yeah, no, I thought there was only 2.
Okay, right. So there you go. I stand corrected. So it's only 2. So which is hard to believe. I think in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I was surprised because I thought Dunleary would have one. We're working on that, and I thought Fingal might have one as well, because both Dunleary and Fingal have sent representations to Dublin Pride over the last official representation. So I was surprised to hear that they didn't actually have
I suppose the hope is once 1 starts and then 2, then more will start, because I suppose it's not that it's fine for us here in urban areas and that, and I'm speaking as someone who comes from a very rural background, but what I would love to see would be more rural, that everyone, and particularly more rural areas where maybe it's something that would be more of a necessity, would be very little visibility or mention. It'd be great to see more people getting involved.
So tell me, Ciaran, I mean, Sarah has said it was essentially driven by people like yourselves. What's the role, and how did the council itself interpret the role of the network?
Well, the council has given us very much free rein with the network. I would say the role is there's 4 kind of main pillars: representation, visibility,
staff representation. Is it?
So to represent the staff, any LGBT staff, visibility. So for the council and for staff members to see that there are LGBT staff members and staff members who are interested in advocating for themselves. Inclusivity. So about making sure that it's not just LGBT people or LGBTQ people as a single entity. I mean, that might be an LGBTQ person that has a different nationality. They might be a person with disabilities. They might be a traveller. It's you can wear more than one hat.
Sure.
So we want to make sure that we're including that and support. So it's to make sure that any staff member who's LGBT can contact the network or become a part of the network, even just sign up to the mailing list. They can be involved in whatever capacity they want, but to know that if they have a question or if they need to know something about South Dublin's policies, or if they are having a problem in work that's related to their sexuality, that there's other people in the network, other people in the organisation that they can talk to about it.
So do you get involved in HR issues as well?
No. So HR are very supportive of us, but we wouldn't be getting involved in individual cases like that. Somebody can contact us to talk about an issue that they're having, but we wouldn't be directly involved in HR problem unless they asked us to be.
Yep. So we know that as we were discussing before we came on, there are a couple of people on the council itself who are LGBT. Is there any interaction with them, or is that considered a separate sphere, as we say?
I suppose we've had great support, particularly from Francis Timmins, Councillor Timmins. He's been fantastic, and we were setting up, and we've met him a number of times, and he's very interested, very supportive. I suppose in terms of the network, people know that we're there. Like at the launch, we had the mayor, Catherine Zapone.
Catherine was there as well, yes.
Yeah, which was fantastic. We weren't expecting, and Councillor Timmins. So we have had a lot of support. We wouldn't, I suppose, be interacting on the daily, but the visibility is there, and then we have our newsletter that people are signed up for, and that as well.
Yeah.
So that would include like councillors and stuff like that.
And how often would you meet?
It's pretty much every quarter now. So obviously different times of the year more things happen and it's quieter. Like around the summer we met more because obviously it's Pride and we were organising like Tony Walsh, we had an exhibition in Dublin Library and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Pardon?
The immortal Tony.
The immortal Tony. Tell me something. He's some man, so he is.
Yeah.
So we were a lot busier then, and then obviously around Christmas and that it gets a little bit quieter in that. But we're always keeping up to date with each other, and I said we put out our newsletter and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, and do you have much interaction with the Dublin one, or is it? I mean, you've only been going for 6 months at this stage, so is it early days, Ciaran? And what sort of interaction would you like with the other council networks?
It's pretty early days at the moment. So when we were first starting up, we were meeting a lot more, as Sarah was saying. With Dublin City, Martina Malone has been instrumental in helping. So when I was kind of starting the idea and talking to Sarah about it and our other colleague Mark, I was in touch with Martina Malone a lot from the other network.
Oh, she's immortal.
Yeah,
she's a force of nature.
She
Martina,
really is a force of nature. And she
brilliant.
was, so with her and our qualities officer, who I also want to mention, Selena Bonnie, who's been extremely helpful. So it was about developing the network and setting up the terms of reference, and I relied on them a lot and the model that she had in kind of setting up the network and deciding what the agenda was going to be. And now going into the next year, it's going to be about so Dublin City, they have an LGBT strategy for Dublin City Council, and that's something that I want to look at in South Dublin, is having a strategy for the county for LGBTQ matters and within the council. And that's something that I want to talk to the Equalities Office and talk to Martina Malone about, and that's kind of more of a strategy.
Sure. Yeah. What would you say are the priorities? I don't want to, I appreciate your strategy is a work in progress, but what do you see as the priorities for that?
I think largely it's about visibility, representation, and also education and awareness. So, I mean, we're in 2019 now, sorry, I almost said 2018, but 2019, and things have moved on drastically in Ireland, particularly in the legislation. But even day to day, there's still gaps in people's awareness and knowledge. So one of the things that I'd like to see is, training so that for staff, so that people are more aware of issues, particularly, trans issues is a big problem. And just not so much a problem of attitude towards among staff, but just a problem of awareness, how to not misgender somebody, or even being aware that you are misgendering somebody. Another issue is sexuality and disabilities. So people with disabilities are often left out of the conversation completely. So they're just not even thought of as being part of the LGBT community sometimes. And that's something that we definitely want to look at with the strategy. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to look at.
Sarah, coming back to yourself on this one now before we conclude. I was at an event about just early December that was held in the Civic Theatre in Tala, put on by Michelle Ann Kelly, called Transition, Family and Me. Now, what I've noticed, particularly in the trans area, it's become it's expanded in terms of identity over the last, say, 5 or 6 years. Previously we had trans people, trans men, trans women. Now we've got non-binary. Now we've got intersex. Is that going to be a challenge for your network as well?
I think it's a challenge for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only, I think, last year that we even had an LGBTI youth strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on a national level, I think it's something that we're all trying to do our absolute best to be as inclusive and as accessible and as much of a safe space, I suppose, as possible. And that will be a challenge for us, definitely. I mean, obviously myself or Ciaran and Mark, we identify as we put the L and G, I suppose, in the category. So it is important for us, like, it's education we have to take on board as well, because we don't know everything. So that's what we were hoping to do as well come the new year, for sure.
Yeah. And what about going out to what we would call the newer communities? I mean, LGBT is it's widely accepted in the communities that we come from, but in cultures where it's not as visible and it's not as acceptable, do you have to take a back step there, or is the approach of the network to try and encourage people to say, yes, we have material in here?
Yeah, like I'd say we'd be encouraging, as much as possible, that I suppose that awareness that it's not just the L, the G. I mean, even the B gets forgotten about a lot of the time.
The B gets
regularly forgotten about.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, we're guilty, overlooked, exactly, and we're guilty of doing it ourselves, I think. So, as I said, in the journey to kind of promoting that kind of awareness, that will make us more aware as well, and that's what we're hoping to achieve too.
Yeah. Just last but by no means least, for people, perhaps, you probably know most of the people who within the library section. How do you, Ciaran, from the perspective of the network itself, how do you see yourself engaging more effectively with, say, the wider public out there?
Well, I suppose the main focus for the network is internal, to South Dublin. So the main kind of, I suppose, the main sort of mission is to be a support network for each other. Okay. But in terms of engaging outside, I suppose the library service is one of the main ways that we engage with the public. The library service is for the council, one of the main ways that the council engages with the public. Yeah. So one of the things that we would do is make sure that there's material on our shelves, make sure that we're doing displays, make sure that we have events going on, and make sure that those events are LGBT related, particularly around Pride, and make sure that we're engaging with other organisations.
Like even during Pride, like we made up badges, for like South Dublin reads, and then we pronoun badges as well. And like we great engagement, people going, what's the they?
Do you march in Pride with the Dublin Network?
We marched in Pride with the Dublin Network as well. So that's all kind of, filtering out, I suppose.
I suppose the main thing about it is that as a network, we're networking with other organisations outside of ourselves as well. Sure, yeah. So we're networking amongst ourselves, but also with Dublin City, with Outhouse, with, and trying to make links with other organisations to come in and maybe do training events with us, or maybe do events like the one that Tony Walsh did in Tallaght. Yep. And that's kind of the main.
What did Tony do out here?
So Tony did an exhibition in Tallaght about the 25 years since the decriminalisation of homosexuality, and it was an excellent exhibition from the National Queer Archive. So it's about doing events like that.
Well, there's an interesting one, and I just I'm going to conclude in this one. Tony and I, we both share this interest in evolving LGBT history, and he's been doing it for ages in. Particularly with the queer archives, and I've been doing it with trans archives as well. Is that something you would see as having a benefit of having perhaps a centralised facility, an online facility where there was audio visual there was printed material there? Is that something you would perhaps see as ultimately being an additional service within the libraries? That
would be absolutely incredible to have that resource. I mean, archives of any history are obviously extremely important, not just from a historical perspective, but from a modern perspective. You know, when it comes to looking at policy, when it comes to how we are as a society, we need to look at our history.
Should look at England. It's Scotland now that are just after bringing in a bill that they're going to have actual LGBTI education.
Yeah,
that's something that hopefully we'll see here at some point, because why shouldn't our history be included with everything else?
Sure. Yeah.
And you need, obviously, with that, you need an archives. You need as much material as you can get, and something like Tony Walsh's archive or an audio-visual archive, that's going to be an incredible resource, and if we could get that included in the public libraries, that would be fantastic, and I think the network would throw full support behind that.
Yeah. Guys and Sarah.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, but I'd love to come back and talk to you another time about perhaps how we can look at creating archives and what sort of material you would like in it. So, Ciaran and Sarah, thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for having us.
My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.